Hello everyone! This is Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today I'm going to tell y'all about my experience at the Midwest Lit Fest at the Thornton Distillery Co. So this was the last event of 2024 that Neal and I did together. And honestly, we couldn't be happier to be able to end the year on a high note. 2024 has honestly been a bit of a struggle in terms of the events that we have gone to sell our books at. And from what we've heard from our friends, not just other author friends, but other creative friends, artists, musicians, designers, just everyone in all the creative fields, 2024 has just been a tough year for sales, whether it be online or in person at events. So to be able to have our last event of the year have a decent number of sales was a nice surprise. Part of this we do think is because Neal and I are attempting to branch out and find new events to include on our regular con circuit, and a big part of this is because we've been doing this for so many years that we've really oversaturated our local audience by going to the same events and seeing all the same people. But we've been trying to branch out at new events, meet new people, and ultimately find new readers. Of course, doing this is taking a risk, and we've taken quite a few risks this year, and unfortunately a lot of those risks didn't quite pan out. Several of the events that we went to, we found just for whatever reason, were not our audience or were just not ideal events for us in particular, and so we won't be repeating those particular events that we did this year, but we do have a lot of other new events that we will be doing going forward into 2025. We're really excited for that con schedule, so be sure to check out both of our social media platforms so that you can stay updated with all of the coming events in the new year. But for now, we did this cute little small event. It was very local at a distillery called the Thornton Distillery Co. Part of what we liked about this event was it was a really good combination of both well-run and hands-off in terms of that the organizers did make sure on the day of the event to go around, make sure that everybody had everything that they needed, were there to answer questions, were there for load-in to assist with any of our needs, but at the same time, they also didn't require a lot of us. The process was fairly hands-off. All they asked was that everybody do their best to promote the event on social media, which of course we did, and that was kind of that. There are some events that, of course, Neal and I tend to avoid that ask you to do quite a lot, which can be surprising to put so much work on the vendors with requiring all sorts of very specific social media marketing posts, as well as being a part of campaigns, being a part of giveaways, having to do specific events or parties or whatever at events, and that can just be a lot to ask. So having a really laid back event like this was a great way to end the year when we've both been working so hard, we've both done so much, and honestly having one more thing to do was really kind of at the end of our to-do list, and the less that we had to do, the better. Promoting the event was rather easy, and there was a great turnout for this event. So it seems that all of the other vendors there, as well as the coordinators, did a really good job of promoting the event. There were so many people that attended this event, and mind you, this was a smaller event. It was a single room in the actual distillery, so it was a showroom that was basically the first floor, and then the second floor was the restaurant. So that also really helped with the draw in that there was food available, and on the floor that we were on, there was also a bar. So it did encourage people to come to the venue to grab a bite to eat and then stay to peruse the vendors while having a beer. That kind of incentive is really important for bringing in people who might not necessarily have come for the event itself, but end up staying once they find out that there is an event going on. As well as a lot of the people there, I could tell, were there for particular vendors, but they did a really good job of walking around and exploring the different booths that were there. So that was really nice too, because there are sometimes events where people will come for a specific vendor and they'll just kind of make a beeline line for them and then leave. And that didn't really happen very much at this event, so it just kept things fresh and also just gave you as a vendor motivation that the event had potential to do well, and in fact it did. So Neal and I didn't necessarily make an enormous number of sales at this event, but for it being small, for it being a newer event and all of that, I think that we made out pretty okay. And most importantly, the people that bought our books at this event seemed genuinely excited about them. And at the end of the day, that is a really big win for me and Neal, because having people that are really excited about our books are people who are most likely to buy more of our books in the future and cross paths with us at other events in the future. So we're really glad that we met some new readers, that we got some people excited about our books, and hopefully we will see them again at future events. We've gone ahead and we've signed up for the repeat event that will be in February of 2025 at this particular venue again. It's going to be really cute in that they are incorporating a music festival, so there will also be live music at that particular event, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that works out and if we have more attendees and, more importantly, more sales. The Midwest Lit Fest event in particular was a one-day event, so it was both a smaller event and a single day, and it started in the early afternoon and it ended in the evening. And this was also really great for me and Neal in that we didn't have to do a really long all-day event, and this really also added to condensing the event so that we didn't have to worry about having too much dead time. That is a mistake that I think that some events make, in that they'll have an all-day event but won't necessarily have the crowd to back it up. So you'll oftentimes have a lot of dead time at the beginning of the event when it's early in the morning, and then you'll have dead time at the end of the event when it's later at night. So cutting out those parts really made this event a lot easier, as well as it made load in and load out easier on us. This particular location is halfway between me and Neal, so both of us drove out and met up at the event rather than one of us driving out to the other and then driving together. It just made more sense for us both to drive separately since it's literally halfway for both of us. Having it be that much of a drive for both of us, it made it a lot easier that this event did not expect us to get there super early in the morning and did not expect us to leave really late at night. Load-in was at 9 a.m. and the event ended around 5 o'clock. This meant that I didn't have to wake up super early in the morning in order to do my makeup and get dressed, so this made life a lot easier on me as well. Since load-in was at 9 a.m., that meant that I just needed to make sure that I left the house in time to be able to travel there, and honestly, it takes me about 2 to 3 hours to do my makeup and to get dressed and get out the door, so not having to wake up at like 3 or 4 a.m., which I sometimes do depending on how early some events start, was a huge help, as well as the fact that it ended at about 5 and it only took us about a half an hour to load out, and Neal and I then went to a local Chipotle and got dinner afterward. The fact that we were able to leave at a reasonable time, we were able to go somewhere that was still open and eat dinner together, it was really nice. It was overall, I would say, an easy, fun, and well-attended event, a perfect way to round out the year and just really end on a positive note. It has been really nice being able to do all of these events this year with my partner Neal. We really enjoy each other's company, as well as we just make it easier on each other. We complement each other with our process, and that Neal really helps me with the physical aspect of load in and load out, and I really help with the social media marketing to show people which events we're going to be at and encourage them to attend the events, as well as drawing people to our booth with all of my elaborate cosplays. We're very much looking forward to the events that we're going to be doing in 2025. We have racked up quite a list of events, as well as traveling a bit, so that will be exciting going into 2025. That our list of events include Kansas, Iowa, and the one I'm most excited about, New Orleans in Louisiana. So this will be our first time doing some author events that are further afield, and we're really looking forward to seeing how these turn out, what the audiences will be like, as well as what it'll be like prepping and traveling much further than we have in the past. Now, I have done full-blown national tours for my modeling back in the 2010s, and driving to Kansas and Iowa really isn't that much of a big deal for me, considering that I've driven all the way from California to New York and back. But in terms of doing this as an author for an author event, really changes a lot because of just the nature of it. With both working as an author and working as a model means stuffing my car to the gills, whether it's with books or it's with modeling gear. However, once I get to the location, that's where things differ. I would definitely say that in terms of gear, working as a model was a lot easier because I was managing clothes and makeup and all that jazz at photo shoots. Whereas doing these author events, I'm doing all of that and also doing setup and managing, working as an author at these events. So that definitely adds on to the expectations as well as the overall physical labor and emotional labor of doing these events, that I'm basically doing everything that I was doing back when I was working as a model and nationally touring, and then on top of it having to lug around all of the gear that we use to set up our booth, set it all up, and then have to sit at the booth and basically entertain attendees and encourage them to stop by our booth and talk to us about our books. All of that is definitely much more labor intensive as well as more of an emotional investment than my work as a professional model. And don't get me wrong, my work as a professional model was incredibly challenging and exhausting. It was hard work, and I'm very proud of the work that I did. And I really feel like doing that for a living helped bring me to the next level as an author working these events, in that this has been a stepping stone for me, just taking all of that I learned and putting it forth in doing these conventions. This combined with Neal's wealth of experience working conventions for far more years than I, and not only that, the fact that he, for many years, worked conventions as staff, so he also understands the inner workings of the convention itself and is just a really big help in terms of navigating the events that we choose to attend, how to apply to them, managing our panel schedules, and all of those behind the scenes inner workings. I do have several videos on my channel detailing all of the details and challenges and tips and tricks for working as an author at a convention. However, I do feel that there is still always so much more to learn, as well as it's one of those things where it's also best learned by doing it. Each event, Neal and I learn more, and we take what we learn and add that to the events that we go to moving forward, just finding ways to be more efficient, finding ways to attract attendees to our booth, finding ways to keep them engaged, and ultimately making those book sales. One of the big things that went over really well at this particular event that other authors that were there even commented on at our booth is that we have little flashcards for our books. And a big part of that is one of my author friends, KM Herkes, is the one who actually originally came up with this idea, but hers were in the form of recipe cards. They were very cute, they were very fun. They encouraged people to come over and read them so that they could learn more about the books. And I took them and made them a little bit more cut and dry. And this is so that it's just a description of what the book is. So it gives you basically, is this fantasy? Is this historical fiction? Is this romance? And then it gives you a short blurb on what exactly you can expect in that book. And the big reasoning behind that is that I noticed that a lot of introverts that would approach our booth were a bit timid and didn't want to talk to us, as well as didn't want us to give our spiel at them, that if we tried to talk to them, they would oftentimes walk away from our booth. And having this non-verbal option for people to approach our booth and to read these cards so that at a glance they can more easily find a book that they are interested interested in, whether that be genre, whether that be the particular trope in the book, whatever have you, that at that glance they can be able to find the book that they want, pick it up, and take a look at it further, thumb through the book and all that. We found that that particular process has worked very well for us, and even for people who are not necessarily so shy or introverted, that they also appreciate that as well, just with navigating our booth, since we just have so many books, as well as they're all multi-genre. We have so many different books available, and it just makes it easier on everybody so that they can kind of have a quick peek before they talk to us and figure out exactly what they want from us and what they want from our booth. There were several authors that approached us and saw these cards and thought that they were a great idea. And I do want to note that I don't gatekeep any of this information. As y'all know, I talk about all of this kind of stuff on this channel. I try to give y'all as much information as I can so that everybody can succeed, because honestly, as I've said in my other videos, I don't believe that authors are necessarily in competition with each other so much as we're all in competition to try and get our books out there and try and get ourselves heard. And with that, it's more about fighting the algorithm on the internet, as well as just the age-old fight of trying to attract attendees to your books. And I found that having other authors at an event actually typically is more helpful than it is hurtful in helping attendees to come over to your booth and see what your books are about. That if there are other authors at your event, most likely there are going to be more people overall at the event who are going to be people who want to read and buy books, which is really to your benefit. Being the only author in an event honestly can be kind of harmful and make attendees less likely to approach you, because that typically means that that particular event probably isn't the intended audience for you, and you're likely going to have a lot of people overlook your booth, as well as even if they come over to your booth, they're not really going to be interested once they realize that books are kind of the only thing that you have going on. I myself have experienced this with trying out some events that are a little bit more unconventional, a lot of these being more geek culture style events, which can be hit or miss. And the ones that were a miss, I was definitely the only author there, or maybe there was one other author there or two, and none of us did well at the event. And if I was by myself, I typically did pretty poorly at the event. And a big part of that is those people were just not there for books, and were not the type of people that were interested in books. So definitely setting yourself apart in that regard is typically not really a good thing. So see your fellow authors as your community and not your competition. There are so many different genres, tropes, and stories out there. There's so many different ways to tell a story that you never know what readers might be looking for, as well as it's a well-known fact that readers love to read more of the same. So if you have a reader that loves, let's say, fantasy books about mermaids, if they go to someone's booth and buy a fantasy book about mermaids, and you also have a fantasy book about mermaids, they'll probably buy your fantasy mermaids book too, because that's the way that a lot of readers are, is they like reading a lot of things that are in the same vein. I myself am in that category. I have particular types of books where if I can find multiple authors that write about the same things, I am all over that. So do keep that in mind at conventions, that you definitely want to look around the room and see other authors there with you. This particular event was billed as mainly an author event, the title being Midwest Lit Fest, so nearly all of the vendors were authors. There were a few other vendors that did sell other things. One of them, being the vendor that was next to us, was selling book-themed cookies, which was absolutely adorable. Their name was Gam's Cottage Homemade Sweets, and Neal and I tried the s'mores cookie, which was kind of like a moon pie, and honestly, it was absolutely delish. S'mores are one of our favorite things, and I mean, this cookie was enormous. Neal and I definitely had to share one because it was just so big, but it was so delicious. And just all of the different descriptions that they had for the different cookies were book themed. I don't know if that's a usual thing or if they did it just for the event, but either way, it was super cute, and I really enjoyed that little touch. And that is a thing, that even if an event is specifically for something, in this case authors, you will see other types of vendors there if they have related product. And this can also be a good thing too, such as if someone's selling cookies, that helps keep attendees there longer, because if they need a snack, they can just go to the cookie booth, pick up a few cookies, and eat those while they're walking around, and that will ultimately keep them at the event longer. better, because if attendees decide that they're hungry and need to leave the event, the chances of them coming back go down drastically. So keep that in mind as well if you see other vendors, especially food vendors at your events, that they are also part of your community and they are there to ultimately help you to retain and attract attendees at the event so that you can ultimately make more sales. And that's really the thing that everyone should be looking at with these types of events, is treat it as a community. These people are not your competition. They are here with you with the same goals. And honestly, unless somebody's kind of a jerk person or maybe they just haven't gotten the memo yet, most people want the other vendors at the event to succeed, because if the other vendors at the event succeed, that means that you're more likely to succeed too. It tends to be kind of the atmosphere where if a handful of vendors are doing bad at an event, most of the vendors will probably do bad. It's just kind of the vibe where all it takes is for a booth to start doing well to kind of crack that vibe and get attendees to be more likely to spend money when they see other people spending money and other booths busy with attendees. They're more likely to then go and explore those booths that are busy with attendees. You definitely want to treat this as a community, and it's when the tide comes in, all the boats float. So you definitely want to make sure that your booths around you are also rising with the tide so that you're more likely to rise with the tide too. A big part of this is also making sure that your booth setup looks nice. And even over the course of the past year, our booth setup has evolved. And every once in a while, I do post pictures kind of showing how far we've come with our booth setup. And even with just this year, we've made a lot of improvements with our booth and will continue to make improvements to it as we go into 2025. But having a really nice, polished booth presence is key in elevating the overall event and as well as attracting attendees to your booth. Having nice tablecloths and having clear signage really does go a long way. The particular styling of your booth is, of course, up for debate. I've seen many different contradicting opinions, such as some saying that you definitely want your whole booth to have all black tablecloths and black backdrops and all of that so that you look more polished and professional and your products pop. I've seen other people say that you don't want to have a black booth, that you want to have more colors and be more vibrant, because otherwise then you blend into the background. The jury's out on that. We personally went with a black style booth with our black tablecloths and our black book racks, just because we have so many different books that the books themselves make our booth really colorful, as well as having black tablecloths like that just make it so much more modular and easier to deal with, because some events do require you that if your booth has colors, that the colors need to be on theme, whether it's a themed event or it's a holiday event or whatever. Whereas if you have black tablecloths, that kind of fits with any event, and then you don't necessarily have to swap out different colored tablecloths for different events. So that's the reasoning behind why we have a mostly black setup with our booth, is that it's just easier, as well as we feel that it makes our books really pop with all the different colors that we have going on. Some authors may argue otherwise, that they feel that different colors work much better with their booths, and honestly, it's very much a to each their own. You should do whatever works best for your booth, and we do what works best for our booth, and that's always changing. We might in the future decide to go with different colored tablecloths, maybe switch them out for different events, for different themes, whatever have you. There's always room for improvement, there's always room for changes to be made, but as of right now, this is the setup that we're going with into 2025. Most of the events that we have booked for the new year are larger events where we will be able to have a full 10 by 10 booth setup. And a big part of that is just because we have expanded so much with the fact that we have so many books now, both me and Neal, and we just really need the space. It's just very difficult for us to do events that are only 1 or 2 tables because we both have very large setups now, and it just seems rather unfair for us to have to condense the books that we bring, because the fewer books that we bring means fewer sales opportunities for different people looking for different kinds of books. So being able to do events where we can bring our full setup is really our goal going into the new year, so that we can really optimize the events that we're going to and make sure that we can have as many of our books displayed as possible. Neal and I also have plans to have more books published in the new year that we can also bring to the new events, as well as having more projects, namely games that Neal is writing, and as well as being able to advertise our YouTube channels more heavily at these events. So on top of all that, having the added space of having a 10 by 10 booth rather than a 1 or 2 table space is really going to be crucial for being able to properly advertise everything going forward. Of course, having this bigger setup means that it is just so much more work, and that means that we have had to do a lot to be able to really streamline our process with load in and load out, as well as just packing and unpacking the cars in general. We had our maiden voyage with our roof cargo at RaptorCon, and that worked out super well. We do have plans in the future, not next year, but definitely in the next couple years, that we will be investing in a trailer hitch and a trailer that will be able to put all of our gear, like our tables and our racks and all of that in, because it's just gotten to the point where the combination of the tables, the book racks, and the bins of books just take up so much space in the car. And then especially if it's a multi-day event where we have to bring different clothes, different outfit changes, all of that, it's just so much space taken up in the car by just so many different things, and then having space for people in the car in general. And going forward, that's also going to be a challenge that we're going to face, is that we are getting to the point where we are going to have to consider hiring an assistant or two doing these events, because our events are just getting bigger and bigger. We're publishing more and more books and projects, as well as I'm getting more physically disabled. Just this past month, November, my family and I recently went to Disneyland to celebrate my mom's birthday, and I really had to come to terms with just how disabled I've become. Unfortunately, walking around the park for the majority of the day just absolutely destroyed me, and I ended up having to be in a wheelchair for the rest of the trip at Disneyland. And that was really difficult for me to come to terms with, that I have become that physically disabled where it's really tough for me to do that much walking. And then as well as just lugging all of this heavy equipment really takes its toll on me. I'm really starting to have more of a struggle carrying all this stuff up and down the stairs and then packing it into the car. It takes me a lot longer to do. It's a lot more energy strain on me. So definitely enlisting another human to potentially be coming with us to events to help us with the physical aspect is going to be a thing that we're going to have to face in the future. As well as doing these big events means that we're also going to have to potentially rely on bringing another human into the mix with all the panels that Neal and I sign up for at these events and get asked to do. And there have been several times where we have had conflicts where the both of us have had to go to panels at the same time, or sometimes even be on the same panel together. So just having an extra person on hand to be able to watch the booth will definitely be a thing that we'll have to look into going into the future. And just all of this is a big part of working as an author at these conventions, is just keeping in mind how fast you grow and what exactly you need in order to reach that growth and maintain that growth, that it does require a certain amount of planning and finances and effort. And so just thinking about all that for the future and how exactly we're going to manage that is a big part of what we're looking at going forward into 2025, because this will be the year where we're going to be doing the most big events as well as doing traveling events. So this will really give us a clearer picture of if we want to maintain this, going forward in the future, every year being big events and traveling, what exactly we're going to have to do in order to be able to maintain that and potentially grow grow that from there. And even though, as I said at the beginning of the video, 2024 was a bit of a down year, that all across the board for creatives, sales have been down, and there were several events where Neal and I either made 0 sales or we made very few sales at these particular events. We don't know what the future holds. We don't know if 2025 will be better, the same, or worse, and that will also impact what we decide to do going forward in our plans for 2026 and beyond. Is what exactly the economy will look like, how likely people are to spend money, because there's no sense in attending events if people are just not willing to spend money. If the money isn't there, then there isn't money to be had to be able to fund doing these events. And as much as Neal and I do enjoy going to the events and dressing up and spending time together, we could honestly do that just staying at home for a lot less money. But ultimately, we want to be out there. We want to be showing off our books. We want to be growing our brand in addition to making the sales. So we're hoping, fingers crossed, going into 2025 that sales will be better and we'll be able to continue to grow our brand and just our overall strategy. There are several author friends of mine that I know that unfortunately have given up on doing these kind of events for that very reason, in that it has been a rather down year, and on top of it, events have been getting more expensive. So it is tough, and sometimes it is the best choice to, whether it's take a year off from doing events or quit doing them altogether, especially if you find that your online strategy is just hand over fist beating out your efforts with doing in-person sales, or if neither are doing well and you just don't have the extra bandwidth to be able to dedicate that kind of time and money to putting yourself out there. And that's a big thing that people don't realize, is seeing all of the shiny posts on social media, seeing all the fun videos of people being at conventions. It's easy to forget about all of the effort that goes in behind the scenes with coordinating all of this, all the packing, all the physical labor, all the emotional labor, everything that goes into making that into the shiny experience that you see on social media. And Neal and I are certainly no different in that regard, in that with these videos and with the things that we talk about online about our events, there's just so much more that goes on behind the scenes that y'all don't necessarily see. And it takes a lot for someone to have that bravery, have that bandwidth, and have the finances to be able to put themselves out there. So absolutely, if you're looking into doing this, make sure that you're ready for that kind of investment and that kind of work. It can be so rewarding, it can be so much fun, and I don't want to scare anyone off, but at the same time, it can be so crushing to jump into it and then look around and realize that you're missing so many components. And I've been there. My first events, I didn't have tablecloths on my tables. I forgot to have a change bank my very first event. I've done all of the dumb choices. I've learned all of the very basic lessons, and here I am 6 years later and I'm still learning from these events. So never feel bad about the mistakes that you make, but make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. Neal and I are doing our best to make sure that we can put our best foot forward out there for 2025 with, as we said, this con schedule, with the exception of doing the Thornton's Distillery event in February. We largely won't be starting our big con circuit until the spring, just because once the holidays hit, as well as just the dead zone financially that is between January and March, where people are the least likely to spend money than they are any of the other months out of the year, aside from Valentine's Day, it's just best for us, as well as just financially in general, to hold off on doing conventions until the spring, unless it's an event that you know will have a good audience and that you know that you'll get a good turnout for, then it makes sense for you to do that kind of winter event. Big goal that I've reached for those particular events that are coming up that I am so excited for is that I've finally broken out into the romance world. I have gotten accepted to a handful of the romance conventions, the Kansas, Iowa, and New Orleans conventions included. So I'm really looking forward to sharing those experiences with y'all and seeing how that world differs from the geek conventions, from the sci-fi and fantasy conventions, and the general several author conventions that I've been going to for all these years. I had to apply to the events, not the same way that you apply to other events, but in that they examine your books and they judge whether or not that they feel that your books are good enough to be represented at the event. So I'm very honored that I was selected to be at these particular events, and I'm really excited to meet the other authors at these events and see what kind of attendees, just what the audience is like at this event, because I imagine it's going to be significantly different from what I'm used to, and I'm just so excited to dive right in with that. Neal is also looking into getting into more of the gaming events, and of course I will be there by his side, supporting him wholeheartedly, as that's what we do as a couple, is support each other's ventures. So I'm really excited for just all of the new experiences that we're going to have this coming year with the different audiences that we are going to be a part of, and hopefully we can add these to our con schedule to repeat in future years. That is the ultimate goal with this, is we are looking for homes, so to speak, for different conventions for our overall yearly con circuit. So be sure to follow our social media channels so that y'all can stay updated on all the fantastic events that we're going to be doing, and be sure in the new year to keep coming back to this YouTube channel so that you can see all of the behind the scenes vlogs about all of these fun events that we're going to be attending. So that wraps things up for 2024. Our con circuit for the year is complete, and I want to thank y'all so much for all of the incredible support for this year, both online and in person. Your support means so much and really helps us to keep moving our brand forward, as well as continues to give us the motivation that we need to keep all these projects and this YouTube channel going. I want to thank y'all so much for watching. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a like, and if you're new, subscribe. All right, y'all, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.